Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon for the University of Regina's 2025 Alumni Effect Virtual Speaker Series. I'm Dr. Sujatha Ross, the University of Regina's Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisor. I'm happy to join you once again during this Black History Month. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to acknowledge that the University of Regina is situated on the territories of the Nehiyawak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis Michif Nation. The University of Regina is on Treaty 4 lands with a presence in Treaty 6. We are privileged to live, work, and learn here. The University of Regina's Alumni Engagement Department is pleased to be able to offer the Alumni Effect Speaker Series each month in a virtual format. I hope that your time with us today inspires you to return for future sessions. I would like to point out that these sessions are being recorded and will be posted on the UFR alumni website so that you can watch the presentations again or share them with your friends and family. You'll see the link to the alumni website in the chat if you'd like to access the video later. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Vibya Natana. Vibya, thank you for joining us. Vibya Natana is a Bachelor of Social Work student from 2022 and has done the Certificate in Nonprofit Sector Leadership and Innovation 2022. Vibya is South Sudanese-Canadian social worker specializing in mental health care and community development. Vibya is passionate about advocacy, policy, and education, and she works to support marginalized communities through organizations like Black in Saskatchewan and YWCA Regina. An experienced speaker and facilitator, she has collaborated with institutions such as Saskatchewan Ministry of Health, the Canadian Public Relations Society, and Luther College. Following this discussion, we have about 15 minutes for a question and answer session. We invite you to submit questions for Vibya in the chat, and I'll read them to her following our discussion. You are welcome to leave your cameras on for the duration of the event, but please note that your microphone will remain muted until the end of the presentation. If you'd like to ask a question live at the end of the presentation, please use the raise hand function at the top of your screen. And now I will turn the floor over to Vibya. To welcome Vibya, and could you please introduce yourself?
Thank you so much, Dr. Sujatha. And yeah, it's amazing to be able to be here with everyone. If you're watching this as a recording or you're here live, thank you for your time in advance. Yeah, when it comes to a bit about myself beyond what has already been shared, which I appreciate, I'm just a very excited young person from Saskatchewan. Like many of the individuals who have the pleasure of being students or alumni at the University of Regina, one thing that is very common among so many of us is just a deep-rooted sense of community, and also the opportunity to get to engage in that community directly as being a smaller campus and just a smaller community in Regina as well. So that shapes a lot of my story, which we'll get into discussing later here. But yeah, in terms of just being able to be here with all of you, I'm extremely excited. I'm also happy that we're now experiencing warmer weather as well. So I think that's put everyone on campus in a great mood as well. So yeah, let's get into the conversation. I'm so excited.
Thank you, Vibya. We are happy to have you join us. My first question to you is, what inspired you to pursue social work, and how has your journey shaped your approach to advocacy and mental health care?
Just growing up and experiencing life in Saskatchewan, being from South Sudanese descent, one of the big things that we noticed was that where there were gaps in different like programming delivery. So this could include things like after school tutoring, cultural transmission through language, and being able to participate in the arts as a way to learn language as well. A lot of these things in my upbringing were just things that seemed like they were there. For example, it's just normal that on Saturdays we would have choir practice where we would get to learn cultural songs and engage with one another. We would have different programming options such as that. But then growing up and realizing, of course, as many individuals who do work with newcomer communities realize, over time as people become more integrated into communities, some of these things that you might have held on to at the beginning of arrival for communities can often fade away over time. So you start seeing that there seems to be a gap, and other generations of newcomers aren't necessarily having the same types of opportunities to engage and participate in cultural activities. So things like that seem to stick out to me quite a bit more. And I think that's when I really started to realize that these things don't just happen. It requires many hands behind the scenes that are intentional about creating these types of spaces for community and filling in those types of service gaps in a way that is reflective of community experiences. So getting to be involved in that through my teen years with South Sudanese Youth of Canada, where we were able to create different programming options for South Sudanese youth to participate in different cultural activities, and various other organizations as well, was a really big contributing factor to me then getting the language to realize, okay, how can I then pursue creating these types of spaces for people to equip themselves with resources on a more long-term basis. And that's kind of what led me to social work initially.
Thank you for sharing that and sharing how your work with the young people and others from the community and wanting to talk about the cultural spaces, developing more cultural spaces led you to this area of work. As someone who has worked in various organizations and institutions, how do you balance your professional commitments with your passion for community development?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. When it comes to even the previous aspect too, because you had also asked around what does the mental health advocacy side of some of the work that I do look like. Having the opportunity to be able to work in organizations and institutions over the course of my career so far, and early in my career as well, that do value community development as not only a separate part of life, but a core part of the organizational strategy as well, has been something that's definitely made it easier. When it comes to working in social impact space, oftentimes the missions of the organizations themselves are directly focused on an area of community development. So for example, currently with my work at the online therapy unit, being able to look at creating accessible mental health options through online services is essentially the crux of what we're doing over there. So that's been amazing too. But of course, when it comes to my own personal interests, I have found that when it does come to being able to balance the professional commitments, of course, and your the scope of your role as a professional with then all of the other commitments beyond that and opportunities that come up around that, I find that one of the biggest things, and I often talk about this with many of my colleagues, peers, and friends who are also doing similar things, is that when you have that passion without a sense of strategy as to how you're going to go about the community development side, it can lead to not only missing opportunities that are right in front of you, but also burnout, and inevitable burnout as well, and feeling like you are doing a lot, but maybe not making the headway that you thought might have been possible. So I think that when it comes to, especially just encouragement for other people who might be in the same space, perhaps at a different point in your life or your career, you found you had a lot of time to be engaged with community, and maybe it's not feeling like that's what is going on in your life currently. I think for myself, what I was able to realize as well is being able to look at your current surroundings and make impact from there. Again, as I mentioned, working in institutions that make this easy is very helpful as well. Whether the institution's mandate is specifically focused on community development, or they partner in community development as well. For just as an example, when it comes to my work as a board member with YWCA Regina, we've been fortunate through so many of our initiatives to have business partners, for-profit business partners in community that always step up to ensure that they're able to lend a hand whenever there's initiatives happening, whether lending their services, their expertise, and so forth. And many of these are local for-profit businesses as well, that are not in the social impact sector directly. So I think that there's always an opportunity to be able to look at how the work that you're doing might be able to support those who are directly on the front line, or be able to further create space for those who are working within your institution to explore their interests. And what I've found as well is that actually creates opportunities for a lot of really great partnerships and collaborations too. In all of the professional roles I've had so far, there have been opportunities for me to be able to look at the community work that I'm doing and see how my organization might be able to not only just contribute our services and benefit the community, but also make it more relational as well, build relationships with young people and other different communities, be able to collaborate on really cool events and projects that might have not happened if my employer or the organization I was working within didn't create the space and just ask as well. So it can kind of be challenging, I think, at times, especially as a young person, perhaps to speak up on some of those things. But one of the best things that I've done is being able to be vocal about my interests and upfront about the different opportunities that I'm involved in outside of the workplace, and see how that's actually created space for new opportunities as well within my work. So it's led to a really exciting career path so far, and I'm excited to see where it continues to grow as well.
Thank you very much for sharing how you're balancing your commitments, work commitments, along with the community engagement, and also drawing our attention to the fact that how collaboration with different people and organizations and others who are not in the not-for-profit sector to make things happen and be more productive. Thanks for sharing that. My next question to you is, how has your South Sudanese Canadian identity influenced your work and perspectives in social justice and policy change?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that this is one that's it's interesting because I think it gives you a different sense of compassion just for the complexity of everyone's stories that people carry. Specifically for my family's journey, it went from not only undergoing the experience of colonialism and displacement in Sudan during previous to Sudan's referendum and becoming South Sudan as an independent nation, and that led to my parents then fleeing from the war in the 90s, going to India as international students, spending many years in India studying there, being part of that community as well, and then having the opportunity to come to Canada and start the next chapter of their lives here as well. So this story is not unique. We have so many individuals with very similar trajectories, and some even more complex in different areas as well. So being able to grow up with that perspective of understanding how just the intersections of class, of race, of migration status can really just impact so many different areas of individuals' lives, I think has just given me a different sense of drive and appreciation for the opportunities that I've been afforded. But it's also reinforced my belief in the power of storytelling as well. People don't always know. They just don't always know, right? And you can't oftentimes fault individuals for what they don't know, but it provides an opportunity to be able to use that knowledge sharing as a starting point as well for not only justice efforts, but being able to create more equitable spaces as well. So when it comes to looking at like policy spaces and being able to ensure that lived experiences are reflected in the ways in which organizations are structured, for example, even just going back to the topic of creating space for employees and professionals to be involved in their communities. There's many organizations that are taking steps to be able to ensure that community development work and volunteer hours are actually a mandated part of what their employees are allotted in terms of being able to be involved in that way, and providing group opportunities as well for staff and individuals to be involved in the community directly without facing repercussions to their living wages and ability to make ends meet as well. So being able to look at it like that and recognize that it's not separating one's identity culturally or otherwise from the everyday work. And in fact, it's all actually part of the same bucket, and institutions and organizations are part of creating thriving communities is something that I'm really passionate about as well, rather than creating separate buckets. And I think that's something that my South Sudanese community does extremely well, is recognizing that when it comes to creating that space within the work that we're doing, being able to bring in elders and their wisdom into conferences for youth, and recognizing that our experiences are not detached from that of our elders, and we require that in order to thrive as well, is again just one little aspect of how I think growing up with that mentality and that support has really shaped my own trajectory as well, and just the opportunities I think that come from that as well. I think one of the other aspects too, when it comes to just how growing up as South Sudanese-Canadian person has also influenced my perspective, is just also, again, being able to have a sense of connection to other marginalized communities too. For example, volunteering with the Regina Open Door Society as a young person, just again, really provided more opportunities to recognize that it requires being able to reach out, be involved in communities to then recognize where you can actually lend a hand. And for the fact that if it's not you, oftentimes it might not be anybody else. So each person does have a unique role to also play in ensuring that our communities are having needs that are being met, but also in unique ways that are reflective of the changing times as well.
Thank you very much. I think your sharing about the Regina Open Door and your work leads me nicely into the next question that I have here. What do you think are the most pressing issues facing marginalized communities in Saskatchewan today, and how can individuals or institutions contribute to meaningful change?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that one of the biggest challenges is oftentimes just the exclusion from being able to be in decision-making spaces as well. When it comes to all of the different issues that are impacting marginalized communities, they all impact Black communities as well. They all impact every type of community you can think of in a different way. So whether we're talking about housing, whether we're talking about employment crises, immigration, food insecurity, all of these different issues all impact communities at any level. Regardless of who you ask, you'll find that there's individuals that are facing these challenges. However, it's the complexities of what that looks like on top of existing inequities as well. So for example, you might be looking at a Black young person who's struggling with mental health, seeking services, as we've seen with various cases that have been publicized in the news, for example, with the late Samuel Uko's story, and how he reached out to go and seek mental health services, and unfortunately was met with racism and prejudice that led to his unfortunate demise and being able to and not being able to seek the help that he so rightfully deserved. In situations like that, you recognize the layers of oppression and how that can really impact individuals' ability to be able to meet their needs in one area. But when it comes to then the role of individuals and institutions to be able to support that change, I think that it does come back to being able to recognize that these issues are not just relegated to one type of individual or community. They transcend that. So when you're looking at issues, for example, of housing and how that impacts individuals, this is an issue that impacts everyone. Everyone is in need of housing. Everyone is deserving of housing. How does that look different for different communities? What are their specific barriers? To be able to find that out, it does require being able to build relationships with the various individuals within the community who are able to speak to those experiences. And oftentimes when we look at the decision-making tables, where these decisions are being made, where policies are being formed and sourced as well, we lack the lived experience at those tables many times. And that can be a challenge in terms of ensuring that it's not only at the the fact-finding stage where we're having the different individuals coming together for focus groups and things like that, which is really important, but also ensuring that throughout the process, after the focus groups are done, after the reports are being made, and in the development stages, at every different point, we do have individuals being able to provide their feedback and lived experience to ensure that the outcomes as well are going to be favorable for those who are living in those different conditions as well. So I do think that when it does come to having diverse leadership, at these decision-making tables, it does make a huge difference. We're really fortunate to be able to have the very first Black city councillor in Saskatoon that was only elected in this upcoming or this previous election, within Saskatoon. There is Sinos Timon, being able to have someone who gets it, not only from their lived experience, but from also being able to build ongoing relationships with community members is so critical. And I do believe that when it does come to institutions being able to do this, it does require ongoing partnership, which isn't a clear-cut solution that many people want to hear. Oftentimes you're looking for maybe some type of formula or strategy in that, right? But oftentimes it really does come back to what opportunities are there to build ongoing relationships with communities that aren't only about what can I extract or what can I learn from you when I'm trying to create the solution, but how can we work together on an ongoing basis to ensure that I'm also learning from you and understanding your values, your priorities as a community, as an organization, and being able to go back and forth in that to create solutions that are actually longstanding as well.
I think you made a very valuable point about not only seeing the issues, but also seeing the contributions that different communities bring to the table. Thanks for sharing that. What advice do you have for young professionals who want to engage in social work, policy change, or community development?
Yeah, this is great because I think that when it comes to, again, coming back to the start of it, which is how did I get involved in social work? I think social work is all around us, and oftentimes many of the social workers, quote unquote social workers that I grew up admiring, I didn't even know that whether they were a social worker or whether they were just a passionate person in the community, right? And there's definitely distinction in terms of the education and all of those things, which can be extremely beneficial. But I say that to just make the point of being able to start where you are. You don't have to wait for the job title or a specific type of role to make an impact. And oftentimes, the types of impacts that you might want to make or be involved in are not going to just be a clear-cut job description. As easy as that might be on paper, I think for many of us who are either just graduating or navigating the world post-grad and all of that, it can be really tempting to want to find the clear-cut path. And perhaps it's like that at different points in life too. You wish that things might be smoother or easier or just with a little bit less decision fatigue involved. But I think being able to recognize that your unique experiences will oftentimes lend to the most fulfilling types of careers because you are creating a dynamic environment that is reacting to the things that you're learning and experiencing, and also being able to be adaptable in that sense too, to not only what you would like to do, but what's needed of you and what you're being called to can also be really important as well. So I think overall, my largest piece of advice is to really be able to prioritize bringing the different areas of your life that you do place value in into the work that you do. It might not all be in one neat box in one organization, but being able to spread that across the ways in which you divide your time. So whether that is with volunteer work outside of your paid role, whether that is within your organization and being able to find ways to be able to bring community work into the work that you're doing in your role, whether social impact focused or not. I think that there's opportunities to be able to live a life where your values are aligned with the type of work that you do, both within the 9 to 5 space or beyond that, regardless of the type of role that you hold. So not being discouraged about where you might start off with that, and just getting started, I think is oftentimes the best way to go about things to ensure that you are feeling fulfilled in your day-to-day work as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Vibya. And we'll now begin to, these are all the questions I had for you, but we will love to transition into giving some time for the audience to ask questions. At this point, would anyone want to ask a question? We have a comment here. Thank you, Vibya, for your wonderful presentation on all of the community initiatives you work on. I'm wondering, are there any upcoming projects or initiatives you are excited about?
Yeah, there are some different ones that I'm excited about. I think when it comes to work within the Black community and seeing all of the different collaborations that are taking place there, it's been really cool to get to see just like the growth of not only Black and Sask, but also other different Black community organizations that are also taking their own space within Saskatchewan too. So that's been really cool. This upcoming Friday, actually, at the studio, which is a community space in the Cornwall Center, we're going to be having an event that's taking place in collaboration with the Saskatchewan Council for International Cooperation, as well as Sask Music that's taking place to celebrate the end of Black History Month that's happening this upcoming Friday. It's open to the public, so if anyone's interested in coming by, we're going to be there from 7 p.m. So it's going to be an exciting time for people to come get together with community, learn about some of the different initiatives that are taking place in the community, and as well hear some amazing local talents too. So that's just one of the many different things that are taking place. We've also had an ongoing series that's being led by one of our community organizers and co-founders of Black and Sask as well, named Wila Munganama, called the Black Health Ed series. That series is still also ongoing with some future webinars and in-person workshops to come too. So if individuals are interested in being part of some of the ongoing workshops and different programming that's going to be coming out of Black and Sask, one way that you can also be involved is by following us on social media at Black in Sask, SASK, on social media to see everything that's going to be coming out of that, and also the opportunities as well to get involved from a leadership perspective. We're very much excited to be expanding and growing in our capacity to bring in just the next generation of young leaders and being able to build capacity in that way too. That's something I'm very passionate about too, in terms of just transitional governance and being able to ensure that we are building that capacity, as has been done for us as well, to ensure that more ideas are coming to the table and we're able to continue on in a good way in that sense as well. So that's a bit about what's happening there to answer your question. Thank you.
Thank you. I think somebody else, is anyone wanting to ask a question, further questions? I had a question for you, Vibya, if there are others thinking. Oh, there's someone raising their hand. Amanda, please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vibya. I don't know if I'm saying your name correct, but thank you so much for the session. It's so inspiring. I'm a student here at U of R, and I'm studying, I'm doing my PhD with immigrants. So some of the stories that I hear are the struggles. Like, for instance, the first generation immigrants are grappling with issues of accent and being isolated. So it sounds like you really have a good connection with the community, and I appreciate that you mentioned the importance of being in community. So for someone who's new to Canada, who doesn't know anything or anybody, and are still grappling to the issues of settling into the new environment, new food, new weather, how do they start building that community and breaking down those barriers that they're facing? I know it might be a big question for you because you're still, learning all the structures in Canada, and like everyone else who is new to this country. So I'd want to understand what your thoughts about that.
For sure, yeah, and I also want to ensure too that I've clarified as well. So when it does come to my lens or perspective on immigration and all of that, it does come from being able to directly be witnessing the experiences of first generation immigrants, but not being one myself from my own personal experience, as my parents. As I mentioned before, like immigrated to Canada, but I was born in Regina. So being able to look at my peers, oftentimes many of my peers who are South Sudanese were the first generation immigrants, although we're the same age, but just life circumstances were, different in that sense as well. And growing up being very much a part of that community, although having just again different lived experiences too. But when it does come to what I have seen from individuals that I've had the pleasure of connecting with, being friends with, and also like supporting too in different capacities, being able to ensure that you are in the spaces to reach out can be a really huge determining factor in being able to ensure that you're informed about the supports available to you. Oftentimes, one of the challenges can be overwhelm that I hear from a lot of individuals in the sense of you're learning so much at once and you want to tackle getting settled academically, career wise, and all of those things, which are fundamental needs. The social aspect oftentimes falls to the wayside. And as you're trying to get settled and established. And oftentimes trying to do it alone can also be extremely challenging too. But taking the first steps in terms of maintaining relationship can be really beneficial too. And oftentimes that can even seem to be a lot. So when it does come to being able to be in a space where you do have the opportunity to introduce yourself, so whether that is a settlement agency and being able to be connected there, Regina Immigrant Women's Center, the Open Door Societies in different major cities of Saskatchewan, and also cultural organizations as well, in terms of someone's ethnocultural background, or even faith communities too, can oftentimes be great starting places in terms of just making the first initial connections as well. Because oftentimes being able to tackle the entire challenge of integration can be difficult, and oftentimes it never gets solved for a lot of individuals in just like one type of way in which you could say that, okay, this was the solution that led to someone feeling totally settled in Canada. A lot of times it's different small pieces along the way for individuals that make a big difference. Being able to ensure stability in one area can oftentimes just look like taking small steps and consistent steps towards building relationships and getting informed, and then seeing how that can grow from there as you address your needs along the way too. But like you mentioned, it is a large question, and I do think that there's a lot of different factors as well that can definitely influence that based on the individual's readiness and experiences to take on different challenges. But I think when it comes to those of us who might not be of that experience and are wondering how to support, being able to be that person that does reach out and check in on individuals and does offer, the resources and the supports in the sense of, hey, have you heard about this event that's taking place? Would you be interested in coming with me? I'd be happy to pick you up and we can go and check it out together and get to know the person on an individual basis, regardless of whether you feel you have all the answers, because it might not require putting on a social work hat, for example, to be able to be a support to someone and just build a friendship, which can oftentimes go a lot further than many of us can expect as well. So I think that would kind of be my first approach to it, is just really getting a chance to get to know people on an individual basis.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thanks for your question.
Thanks, Vibya. I think we just have a minute left. Does anyone else have a question? If not, okay. What's the best piece of advice you've received that has helped you find your voice and grow as a leader in our community?
That's a great question. Yeah, there's so I'm fortunate to have had so many different pieces of advice. I feel like that speaks to a lot of different areas, but one that resonates with me right now at this point in life, as there's a lot changing, I think, in terms of prioritizing and just looking at how I want to be involved in terms of community work, leadership, and my professional capacity as well, I think is to be able to ensure that my priorities and how my day to day is scheduled and what it looks like is reflective of my values, and also ensuring that this is holistic in terms of not just values professionally as well, but looking at other aspects too, emotional values, how I'm prioritizing physical wellness, spirituality, all of these different aspects, culture, and being able to look at the different things that I have planned for myself or that I'm interested in, and ensuring that it's pouring into my life and community work in all those different areas as well. It's, again, not an easy solution or something that happens overnight, but whenever I'm finding myself feeling like something new needs to happen, when I come back to that question and I look at things through that lens, it oftentimes leaves me feeling inspired and excited about the future and how I can take next steps. So I think that was oftentimes, yeah, the biggest piece of advice comes back to that. And that's been a guiding point for me, especially recently as well. So.
Thanks very much, Vibya, for sharing your story, your insights, what you see for the future, and how, as equity seeking marginalized groups, we can be also of support to others, and how, as a community, all of us can be supportive of each other. A video recording of today's Alumni Effect will be posted soon on the alumni section of our website. A link to our website can be found in the chat. Please feel free to share the link with your family and friends. And don't forget to check the University of Regina website and our alumni social media channels for information about upcoming events in this series and more. Our next Alumni Effect will be on March 18, 2025, and with Jill Stroder, who will inspire us all through some discussions about women in male-dominated roles as we celebrate International Women's Day. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Those of you who have been part of this conversation, and thanks, Vibya, and thanks, Alexis. Until then, take care, and thank you for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Thank you.